Hi, hello, I'm Val, or Space Valkyries. I'm a queer variety streamer and sci-fi fantasy writer, and this is my review of Deathloop, specifically the PS5 version. Deathloop is a first-person shooter from Arcane Studios, the folks who made the Dishonored series, and I've loved their other games, Prey and Dishonored 2 in particular, so I've been really hyped for Deathloop. And while it mostly lives up to that hype, there are some issues I'll get to more in depth later. But first, let me set the scene and get this party started.
Let's break some loops.
You play as Colt, and you're in the middle of some time loop shenanigans. And those time loop shenanigans are wrapped in the 60s aesthetic and covered in lots of death and explosions. Colt wakes up on a beach in Black Reef, an island that's both heaven and hell, vacation and prison. He's caught in the loop, where you relive what's called the first day over and over and over, for forever. There are 7 visionaries that set up Black Reef and the loop, along with their Eternalist lackeys, which you will be murdering a lot. Like, a lot. They intended for it to be some sort of immortality, relive the same day over and over forever, never truly die. Well, Colt wants to break the loop. And Juliana wants to stop you. To break the loop, Colt has to kill the 7 visionaries on the island in a single day, and Juliana too. Why? Well, this is a spoiler for your review, so I can't tell you. But I can tell you that the twists and turns are fun. Most of this game is just fun, and the writing especially was such a good time. It's so solid, engaging, and it made me giggle at the snarkiness in multiple places. A lot of the flavor text you find is well done too. The visionaries all have fun dialogue with Colt, or surrounding things Colt can do. I tried to throw a grenade through a window once at one of the visionaries, and it prompted a different dialogue line than usual, and that helps make the loop feel fresh each time, and not just like you're redoing the same thing over and over and over. The banter between Juliana and Colt is great and made me laugh. And it only gains meaning and snarkiness, and maybe even some emotions, the closer you get to ending the loop. And narratively, I really like how Colt's dynamic with Juliana and the story overall resolves in the end. Again, no spoilers, I promise this is a spoiler-free review, but to the writers of this game, I really loved what you did with it. Also for the PS5 version specifically, since this is a PS5 review and I played this on PS5, when Juliana calls you on your radio, her audio comes out of your controller. It was odd at first, but I really enjoyed it after a while. In general, I really enjoyed a lot of the feedback audio from the controller for various abilities and like picking up trinkets or slabs or slab upgrades. It was a nice touch. There's also this snarky, mysterious, floaty text that I think is from Colt to Colt that only Colt can see. It gives a fun layer of context to so many scenes, adding an unspoken narrator of sorts that a lot of games don't typically have, so my writerly self had a lot of fun with that, and the sometimes very random plot hints that the text threw at you. I know I tend to flail about cool visual narrative stuff, but Deathloop has literal visual narrative in most places. It was great. The floaty text also warns you when certain routes might be full of Eternalists trying to murder you. And I also loved ignoring it and going in anyway, just to see what happened. Then I'd usually die, but hey, it's fine. The slogan of the game is literally, if at first you don't succeed, die again. And you will die. And die some more. And even more. Usually you won't be mad about it. It's baked into the mechanics, and over time you'll find abilities and power-ups that allow you to die less and be very badass in the process. Gameplay-wise, if you like shooters, you'll find a lot to love about this game. There are a variety of weapons and gadgets to change up your murder plans per loop so it doesn't feel stagnant. The core mechanics and concepts of Deathloop are fairly straightforward. You're trying to kill 7 visionaries over the course of a single day, and to do that you have to gather intel and die a bunch. But ultimately you're stitching together a plan based on what you learn about them and their day-to-day habits to kill them in a single loop. It's a fun and unique concept for a first-person shooter game. The day itself is broken up into 4 sections: morning, noon, afternoon, and evening. And Juliana is hunting you all throughout this. She can be an NPC or played by another player if you enable PvP mode, but full disclosure, I did not test the PvP out as I was so focused on the narrative, so my experience is exclusively with single player mode. If you die at any point, that's it. The day ends, you start over. After a little bit, you get access to slabs. This gives you 3 chances per loop. So if you die twice, that's okay. Die a third time though, and that's it. Loop over. Start again. You get that initial slab that allows you 2 do-overs before the third and final death of that loop. There are also places where your slab abilities can be nullified, meaning you only get 1 death and then that's it. Most of the visionaries have unique slabs with unique powers. If you've enjoyed Dishonored before, some of them will absolutely feel familiar, which I enjoyed, honestly. Deathloop's version of certain abilities still feel very much Deathloop in vibe and style, but you can see the sort of Dishonored/Arcane vibe and inspiration underneath. Also, seriously, I had a lot of fun combining the Aether and Nexus slabs. It was just high chaos land, and I loved it. You also have a Hackamajig, and I use that thing so much. You can use it to hack turrets, alarm sensors, some more turrets. One of my favorite things was to hack a turret, pick it up, then carry it to a bunch of Eternalists, and just let it do its thing. It was beautiful, honestly. Playing around with power and weapon combinations was easily one of my favorite parts, especially towards the end of the game. Now, the game does have a way to carry over certain weapons and upgrades throughout your loops. Not long after you get access to slabs, you also get access to Residium. Residium allows you to preserve items and slab abilities. It resets at the end of the day though, so use it when you have it. Because if you die 3 times, or just once, again, if your slab gets nullified, you lose everything you collected that run. If you got a fancy gun or some nice slab or like a slab upgrade you really wanted, boom, gone, just done. Which, ooh, that can really, really suck. And here's where I get back to the issues I had with Deathloop. The gameplay can be fun, like seriously fun. When I succeeded at murdering in stealth, it felt really good because I am notoriously bad at stealth. Seriously, there's a stealth fail counter in my stream, like, I'm very bad. So when I actually managed to kill a visionary, I felt so empowered and badass. But while the gameplay has really strong moments, it has some unnecessarily punishing elements. And because of that, it loses a lot of basic accessibility for combat and loop mechanics specifically, as I can't speak with any confidence on other accessibility options. But let's take a moment to talk about the gameplay mechanics and the lack of customization options for combat difficulty specifically, as that's what really messed with my experience here. There are no difficulty settings, which I'm guessing is because of the PvP mode, where the player can invade another player's game as Juliana, especially since Arcane Studios has had difficulty settings in the past, like in Prey and Dishonored 2 definitely have difficulty settings. But fine, they're doing something a little different with this one. PvP means no difficulty settings. I could have lived with that if there were other customization options, like a toggle to enable Residium use on death or never lose slabs type options. It would have made a world of difference while still allowing for that intense difficulty if a player wanted it and not messing with like the actual combat difficulty in the game itself. But to make matters worse, day 1 of the game being out was buggy. So multiple times I lost everything simply due to it crashing. The game froze at least 3 or 4 times. It crashed my PS5 twice. I will say without a doubt this was the messiest, buggiest launch game experience I've ever had on the PS5. Now, those bugs did seem to reduce over time, but I definitely had to walk away from the game for a couple days. Between the random crashes and freezes and combined with the super punishing gameplay mechanics, I would sometimes lose hours of work. It was not a fun experience. There was one time I got a super cool gun, like a legendary level, like from one of the Visionaries guns, And then I lost it because the game crashed and all the work I had done to get it. And I never got it again because the work it took to get it the first time was just, it was a lot of stealth and like one die, you know, I only had one death. So if I died, it was just, that was it. And I did not want to redo that and then lose all that progress again. I couldn't do it. And I felt very sad about it. Even without the bugginess though, a few times I just happened to make one small misstep and absolutely lost everything. There were multiple times where I thought I was safe and was getting to the exit, but then I somehow managed to alert everyone and someone like shot me and killed me because I was on my last life, and then I lost everything I'd been working so hard to collect. It felt cruel after a while, and it really, really negatively impacted my experience with the game. Ultimately, Deathloop is a very good first-person shooter experience with a great narrative to boot. It's memorable, it's fun, hell, it'll probably be a Game of the Year contender for many people. It's definitely up there for AAA game experiences for me for this year when the gameplay worked well. But the overly punishing difficulty and lose everything on death mechanics make it hard for me to enthusiastically recommend this game for everyone. So, who do I recommend it to? I definitely recommend it if any of the combat or death mechanics mentioned aren't an issue for you. This game is going to be a treat for you if that's not a problem. Like, have all the fun, and I didn't mean that non-sarcastically because I realize how passive-aggressive that sounds, but like, have fun. To anyone else interested in Deathloop but is maybe unsure if the gameplay is going to be enjoyable, be mindful when purchasing the game, and if there are refunds allowed. I know Steam does refunds. I'm not sure about the PlayStation's policy on that, or any other console. Like, I'm just know what your refund policies are for the platform you get this on, and try it for yourself and see. Because I definitely think this game is worth testing out if you like first-person shooters or other Arcane Studios games like Dishonored 2 in particular. There's so much fun to be had here. It's just not as accessible as it could have been, and that kind of sucks. Now, before I end this review, I just want to say that I hope accessibility is something AAA and indie developers alike consider more in the future, especially for games that are supposed to be punishing. And I really want to make this clear before anyone comes into the comments like, well, what about this other notoriously challenging and difficult game? It would defeat the purpose of the challenge. To which I say, without accessibility, without genuine inclusivity in how you think about and create games, that challenging game is just pointlessly restrictive and denies a big percentage of gamers any satisfying experience with it, simply because of its narrow and able-bodied focus on what makes a game challenging and rewarding. And while not every game has to be for everyone, this game just isn't for you then is far too often used as an excuse to not consider marginalized communities like the disabled and neurodivergent communities in a game's creation, and I do not accept it as an excuse for poor accessibility options. Again, this is a want of mine for accessibility in games in general. It's not just me dogpiling on Arcane specifically, but also the need for more customization options and basic accessibility became painfully apparent in my playing of this game. And I love most of what Arcane Studios has put out game-wise. Again, Dishonored 2 and Prey are two of my favorite AAA games, like, of all time. They both have, at the very least, difficulty settings where Deathloop just doesn't. And I want the studios to succeed. I want to like their work. I do like most of my experience with Deathloop. So this isn't me just being mean or critical for no good reason. Because ultimately this game was for me. I walked away from my time with Deathloop happy with the ending I got and very pleased with myself for having managed to kill all the visionaries in one day. Even if some of those kills were like on accident and like I stumbled my way into it, but it's okay, it still counts. And that's it for this review. Thank you for watching. I'm kind of anxious about expressing myself and having slightly negative opinions on some aspects of a AAA game. So I apologize for being a little flaily about it. But I hope you enjoyed it, and if you found this review like fair or helpful, be sure to like and subscribe and smash that little bell. Yeah. I usually post videos every other Thursday or every Thursday if I'm having a good energy time, because, you know, that good old chronic illness life, that good old chronic fatigue issues. And if you want to support me, you can become a member on Ko-fi, and get sneak peeks and early access to videos, as well as monthly updates and other fun stuff. Till next time.